Hello and welcome to this week's video. So today we're going to be having a look at one of my all-time favourite DC comics from the Bronze Age, and that's Swamp Thing, created by Len Wein Berni Wrightson. So we'll be looking at all of the issues that were released for Volume 1, as well as a few that came out from the end of Volume 1 up until Volume 2 started in the early 80s. So that's going to be what we're looking at today. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay, so here we are with one of my all-time favourite comic book series, and one that I sort of fell in love with very early on in the late 70s, perhaps, when I was reading the odd issue of Swamp Thing as a kid growing up. Its first sort of appearance, and it was more of a tryout more than anything, was actually in this comic here, which was House of Secrets, number 92. It's got a lovely Berni Wrightson cover there. Dated 1971, and as I said, the pair of them, Len Wein and Berni Wrightson, certainly created something quite special here. Wrightson had done a few of the covers for House of Secrets up to this point, and this is like, a bit like a DC showcase. This was a bit of a test issue, and it is absolutely fantastic, and it sets up the story of Alec Holland going forward. Quite a tough issue to find, this one now, particularly in high grade, simply because it's got such a dark cover. I've had a couple of copies through my hands. This is the best one that I've kept. It's got a little T&P, Thorpe and Porter, 5p little stamp in the top right corner there. But to be honest, that's a really nice copy of that one, and certainly sort of one of the key issues from the 1970s. And I'm very pleased to have that one. For a long time, Swamp Thing, before the Alan Moore took over in the 80s in Volume 2, Swamp Thing was not an expensive comic to collect, and thankfully I picked up most of my run back then when it was cheap. A bit of a different story these days, and issues can be quite expensive. Now, this particular one, House of Secrets, has been reprinted a few times. This is one that came out as a Silver Age classic. Now, this was, when did they publish these Silver Age classics? Obviously, it mentions the original publishing date there at 1991. Oh, was it that long ago? It seems that time. And it was also reprinted again for the Millennium edition. I don't know if you remember those, in 2000. And they just reprinted it then as like a Millennium edition. Obviously, a much better quality paper, so you get to enjoy the artwork even better. Really good stuff. So a little after that, because the first Swamp Thing series, Volume 1, ran for 24 issues, and that was from 1972 to 1976. And as I said, Len Wein was the writer of the first 13 issues, before David Michelini and Jerry Conway finished up the series up to number 24. And Berni Wrightson, the horror artist, drew the first 10 issues of the series, while Nestor Rondondo drew the further 13, with the last issue being drawn by Fred Carrillo. So not familiar names to many people, except Len Wein and Berni Wrightson. So the basic premise was that Swamp Thing fought against evil as he sought out the men who murdered his wife and caused his monstrous transformation, as well as searching for a means to transform himself back into human form. So that's the basic premise of the series. Throughout the series, Swamp Thing does fight many villains, most notably the mad Dr. Anton Arcane, who he meets twice during the first series. Arcane and his obsession with gaining immortality, aided by his nightmarish army of unmen and the tragic Patchwork Man, which was actually Arcane's brother, Gregory Arcane, who after a landmine explosion was rebuilt as a Frankenstein monster-type creature by his brother. They become the Swamp Thing's nemesis, even as the Swamp Thing developed a close bond with Arcane's niece, Abigail Arcane. There we are. This is number 3 here. Also involved in the conflict was Swamp Thing's close friend turned enemy, Matthew Cable. He was a federal agent who originally mistakenly believed the Swamp Thing responsible for the deaths of Alec and Linda Holland. Absolutely beautiful sort of graveyard cover that. I really, really like that one. Now, despite Wein writing the first 13 issues, only the first 10 issues of the original Something series have been collected in trade paperback or reprint comics, primarily due to the popularity of, obviously, Berni Wrightson's artwork, stopping rather than concluding the story arc. Wein ended his run as writer by having the Something reveal his identity to Matt Cable and ultimately avenging the death of his wife by killing Nathan Ellery. The full Len Wein run, a 13-issue one, was released in hardback by DC, finally in June 2009. Now, as sales figures plummeted towards the end of the series, the writers attempted to revive interest by introducing fantasy creatures, sci-fi aliens, and even Alec Holland's brother, Edward, a plot point ignored by later writers, into the picture. Number 7 here was always one of my favourites. This is the first crossover with anybody from the main DC universe, and you just see Batman down there. I seem to recall reading that Wrightson would do the artwork and send it up to DC's offices in New York, and some of the original artwork for this got lost in the post, if you can believe it. So it never surfaced. It just literally got lost in the post, and that was that. So Wrightson had to redraw all that original artwork, which must have been well, heartbreaking, I would guess, at that time of producing the comic. The appearance of Holland's brother towards the end of the series marked a series of plot developments designed to provide the series with a happy ending, which did generate much controversy at the time. In Swamp Thing 23, Alec finally regains his humanity, and while the creature was on the cover of the 24th, the final issue of the series, albeit transforming into human, Holland appeared as human throughout the story, throughout the interior story. This one here, then, this is number 9. This is often this cover image was reused on many of the later reprints where they gathered these together. Let's go through to some of the later issues here. Number 10. So that was the last one actually drawn by Wrightson, cover and interior, and after that the cover artist changed. Still very, very nice. This was obviously around the period of the Gothic horrors, and you can really feel that with these issues. Number 12 here, another great cover, that one. Number 13. Number 14. And the good thing is, because there is only 24 issues, it's not exactly difficult to put a run of these together. However, I found 22, 23 and 24 quite difficult to find when I was first collecting them first time around. Things may have got a little bit easier with the advent of eBay these days, where you can just about get any comic you want if you try hard enough. Number 17 there. You can see the sort of sci-fi element creeping in here, and it's not great, I admit, but it is part of the Swamp Thing story. Number 18 there. $19, $20, the Mirror Monster. $21. This is the sort of the first sort of influence of the sci-fi element creeping in here. Bit of a shame, but you know, I guess they seem to be running out of ideas. That's 22. Obviously, in issue 23, Alec does finally regain his humanity, which is cool. They did sort of round it up. The logo changes here for number 23 and 24, which I'm not a fan of. On number 24 there, you do see Swamp Thing beating up this character here, which is called Thrudvang. And the issue depicts Alec Holland there with his new love interest, and his brother's research assistant running away from Thrungar. A battle between Swamp Thing and Hawkman was promised for the next issue in that, but no such battle occurred, at least not until Alan Moore wrote that story in issue 58 of volume 2. Now that's the original run, but the character didn't disappear completely from the DC universe, and he does carry on. So there was a short-lived revival of Challenges of the Unknown, and Swamp Thing makes an appearance in issues 81 to 87. I haven't quite got all of them. Mine starts at 82, but I believe he is just in the very end of 81. So these are like full appearances. There he is actually on the front cover there of number 83. These were by Jerry Conway again, and Swamp Thing returns as Alec Holland, who without continually producing and self-medicating with the biorestorative formula, he then reverts into the form of Swamp Thing, a bit like the Hulk, really. Holland, along with the Challenges of the Unknown, encounter the supernatural, being known as Deadman. So there he is, he's guesting Deadman there, although they were unaware of Deadman's presence, a fact that will confirm the post-Wine Swamp Thing story's existence in the DC Universe continuity years later, when Deadman and Swamp Thing met again during Alan Moore's run as the writer. Some of my all-time favourite Swamp Thing comics. So these ones are a bit of a curiosity. There's only a handful of them, as you can see here, but they do all contain nice appearances by Swamp Thing. So if you're a collector, you will want to get those. He did also appear twice in Brave and the Bold. So that was the Batman team-up comic, basically. And this is in issue 122 and issue 176. So a couple of Brave and the Bold appearances to collect there. Then the original Wrightson run was reprinted first time round. So this was about 6 or 7 years after the original run had been printed in DC Comics Presents, which is a really obscure and quite difficult to find anthology series. And over the course of a few years, they reprinted all the Wrightson ones, with the exception of, well, they did all the Wrightson issues. They didn't do the final Len Wein editions. And as you can see, these are really nice nice comics, these big thick ones. They're dollar comics, so they've got 2, well, this one's actually got 3 issues inside this one, but the other ones have got 2. So it's the original Swamp Thing saga, and as I said, those are probably quite tough to find, even though they are reprints. So that's those. And then they did also reprint the Wrightson run again in what was called Roots of the Swamp Thing. This was just another plain reprint title. And this was a 5-issue miniseries, 2 issues per comic, and they reprint the original Len Wein and Berni Wrightson run again. So there's lots of ways to read that one, as well as obviously in the rather nice Ultimate DC hardback editions now. And there we are. So you can see they reuse the covers on these as well. So that's Roots of the Swamp Thing. Now there's just one other Swamp Thing related thing I would like to run by your way, and that's this one. Yes. So this is called the Holland Files, and this is a Swamp Thing fanzine that is edited and put together by one of the world's leading, probably got the best collection in the world of Swamp Thing memorabilia, and that's a chap called John Boylan. Now this first issue did come out over a year ago now, and there has been a couple of follow-up issues. I was lucky enough to have a small article in this one, my muck-encrusted memories on page 56, and I certainly recall my time collecting Swamp Things. This is my bit here. I do also have a little bit of original artwork from the comic as well, by Richard Piers Rayner, and I wholeheartedly recommend you tracking down a copy of this. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. So if you're a lover of Swamp Thing and everything to do with Swamp Thing, then this is the magazine for you. It's absolutely fantastic. So it looks at obviously all the comics, the books, the original movie in the 80s, the TV show, then the revived TV show that was sadly short-lived. He got the blessing of Len Wein and Berni Wrightson just before both of them passed away, and it certainly is worth tracking down. So just in case you're not aware of it and you are a Something fan, the Holland Files, as I said, is a really, really great read. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this look at these lovely Swamp Thing comics. I've certainly enjoyed going through these. If you have enjoyed it, please give the video a thumbs up. Do consider subscribing for regular comic book related content. I certainly intend covering volume 2 in a future video, although that might have to be split over perhaps 2 or 3 parts just to get them all in. Until then, thanks very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.